Welcome to the Whole Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you become a fat burner, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey everybody, it's Debbie Potts, the host of the Whole Athlete Podcast, and I have a new guest on the show today with a new topic I'm trying to focus on since it's time of year, New Year's, when we're recording this, to talk about recovery and repair and reducing chronic stress, as we talk about all the time. So I have Joe on the line today and on video, if you look at our YouTube channel, the Whole Athlete channel, and talk about floating. And Joe, you work for Urban Float, so thanks for coming to the show today, first of all.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And you're in Houston right now, and you guys are in Seattle originally, but you're expanding all over. So let's kind of talk about how you got involved in Urban Float and what is floating.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. So I'm one of the co-founders of Urban Float, and it started in Seattle. As you mentioned, it was back probably 2011. I was looking for a way to become a better mental performer. So I know this podcast is a lot about the physical aspect of performance. They go hand in hand, yeah. And we'll get into that for sure. But
yes.
I was looking more for the mental angle, just for work, just trying to climb the ladder, do better, be more, that kind of thing. I came across floating in 2011. There was nowhere to do it back then. I eventually found a place to do it at a guy's house. He had a private float pod, and I got his number. I called him up, and he was a little surprised, like, who are you and why are you calling me? But I told him I was obsessed with this idea of floating, and I just had to try it. And he agreed to let me use his pod at his house. So I went there, I used it, I came out of that first float, and kind of changed my whole life after that. My whole path, where I was going professionally, everything. It was such a profound experience for me. And I knew that other people needed access to this. It was that good. And so I sent my wife to go float just to make sure I wasn't crazy. She came out of that and said the same thing. Like, you got my support. If this is something you want to do, I think it's awesome. So we opened our first location in Fremont, which is a little neighborhood in Seattle. And it just took off. That was in 2012. And people just came in droves. We were open 23 hours a day in the beginning. We had all kinds of customers, like all walks of life. It was pretty awesome to see. Many of them athletes, but a lot of just tech workers or hunter pianists, or you name it, anybody.
Wow.
And we just kind of grew from there and opened more stores just to kind of keep up with demand. And like you said, now I'm in Houston. We're franchising this concept out. So I'm down here getting another location open, our first in Houston. So that's very exciting. And we're just bringing floating to the world.
That's great. Well, just to kind of review this podcast, I've evolved over the years. We used to always talk about endurance athletes, triathletes, eating more fat for fuel, being more metabolically efficient. And over the years, as myself as a coach and a trainer for 25 years and a competitive athlete myself, I developed the holistic approach, the holistic method that we transform the whole you from the inside out. And there's 8 elements. So that it's nutrition and exercise, of course, but also stress that we cover, sleep, movement, gut health, digestion, hydration, and happiness. And so we kind of rotate talking about the different topics of the holistic method on the podcast, because for really athletes of any level to really be performing your best in life or sports, it's not just exercising more and change the way you eat. So I love, the concept of working on your stress and disconnecting is really big to me, because I'm really annoyed of our society of the addiction of always being on, and everyone connected to their phone, adults and kids, and ADD and all this stuff going on. It's really frustrating. So I really am interested in sharing the knowledge of what floating means and how important it is. So talk about what is floating, how it works. I went on Tuesday, a couple days ago, and did my own experience, which is amazing. And I'll add in one more thing you don't know, probably new to the podcast, but I wrote a book about life is not a race of being chronic busy and chronic stress. Because I've had 5 years of recovering from adrenal exhaustion. And so that's why I tie it in, because I think any athlete of any level just trying to be healthy, it is working on what you guys are talking about, I think, today.
Yeah.
We'll get into it. So go ahead and just dig into what is the pod, and we'll get into all of that after that.
Yeah. So basically the idea of floating is you're in a pod or some sort of a float equipment. In most cases, it's a pod. Sometimes it's a room or a cabin, depending on where you go. But the concept is virtually the same across all of those. And it's about 200 gallons of water with 1,200 pounds of Epsom salt dissolved into it. So it's very dense. It makes you very buoyant. You get in this kind of cocoon-like thing, and you lay back, and the water and the salt just completely lifts you up. You become essentially weightless. Or probably as close as you can get to weightless without hopping on a rocket ship. So it's a really unique feeling. And in addition to just that physical environment of being fully supported, you've also got reduced sensory input. So sound, you don't hear anything, you don't see anything, you don't feel anything. The water is skin temperature, the air is skin temperature. So over time, you start to lose the awareness of where your body ends and the water or air begins. So you've just got no sensory input, which, to your point earlier about just hyper connected, we've got devices, we've got things pulling at us all the time. Yeah. This is a complete disconnect from all of that, total disconnect. And that does great things for your mind and your body.
Mm-hmm. Well, some of the, looking at the emotional benefits, it says the floating clinically shown to decrease anxiety, reduce symptoms of depression, increase optimism, improve feelings of well-being. But then also the mental benefits are shown, you said, to decrease stress. Obviously, I think that would be a big one, and increase mindfulness and improve mental focus. So can we kind of talk a little bit about these benefits and how do we get those benefits from floating? How does that work?
Yeah, for sure. So the way we look at kind of the benefit structure of floating is, if you think of 4 quadrants, people are either trying to get something out of floating or possibly deal with something through floating on the physical or mental. And as you said, emotional kind of ties in there as well, probably more on the mental side. In the case of like physical, maybe you're trying to get less tension and be loosened up, or on the mental side, you're trying to deal with stress and anxiety. There's been some really interesting studies that are just now starting to come out. This has been talked about for years, decades even, and there's been some studies that have come out, and some of those examples you talked about are published. But some of the most exciting ones aren't published yet, but they will be very soon. And they're already reporting like a 90% reduction in stress after one float.
Wow.
It's pretty crazy. And I think, people go into this environment and they're able to just let go and really focus inward for a minute, or an hour, really. Each float session is an hour long. So it's an hour of me time, you time. It's to clear the clutter. You can go in there with intention or without intention. So you can go in there and just relax and see what happens. And you may fall asleep. Some people do. You may drift off and kind of let your thoughts wander here or there. Or you may go in with the specific intent of, I'm dealing with a very stressful situation right now. And not only is that stress weighing on my mind, but the stress is being physically manifested in my back or my shoulders. So you get in there and you can kind of focus on letting that go and kind of working through it. And it's just having great impact for people. I mean, we see people from, like I said, all walks of life, from professional athletes to even young kids that are dealing with things at the age of 12, different anxiety issues, or, you name it. It's having great effects for many people.
So talk about how, if you're new to floating your first time and you're new to meditating, and in my mastermind group I'm in with Todd Durkin in fitness industry, we've been talking a lot about meditation, and in my health certifications I have, meditation is pretty big, but it's also challenging for most people, as you said, letting go. And that's a good mantra, let on your inhale and go on your exhale. But, talk about how people can learn how to get themselves to let go, to meditate in a way while they're floating.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought up meditation, and you said it first. I try to avoid that word because instantly some people just have this notion like, oh, meditation, that's not for me, or, I tried it and it didn't work. But The nice thing about this is it's kind of like meditation or training wheels for meditation. You don't need to know how to meditate. In fact,
training wheels.
I'm not a quote unquote meditator. I wish I was, and I have thoughts about working on that practice.
Yeah,
but I do
me
float.
as well.
Yeah, but I do float, and I get a lot of the same benefits. I mean, it is meditation at a very basic form. You go in there and you're breathing, you're counting your breaths, and you're kind of just letting things go. So for the new person who's just coming into this, we always ask them to give it 3 tries. You can't just go float once and say that was for me or that wasn't for me. It's like you go do yoga and I can't get that pose. I'm not bendy enough. That's the whole point of yoga. You go to get flexible, and you go to relax and work on that practice. Floating is a very similar experience. Your first time in there, you're going to be looking all over the pod saying, what is this thing? How much time has gone by? Should I be getting out now? What should I be doing? Am I bored? Like all these questions going through your head. Also trying to remember, what did the staff person tell me about how do I turn the light on and off and all that? It's just a lot. So the first time is not usually that great for people, but the second time, all of that is out the window because you know now what to expect. So the second time you start to slide in a little bit. And then the third time, that's usually when people have that aha moment, like, oh, okay, I get it now. I've come out of this thing and my mind is clear. I'm refreshed. I feel good. Another really kind of just low-hanging fruit thing that people always comment on is I slept really good that night. That's a huge benefit that pretty much everybody gets. It's the lowest hanging fruit for benefit.
So are you familiar with brain waves? And would think a lot of you getting into that kind of what was meditative state. We've talked with Phil Maffetone a few times about even when you go for a bike ride and you forget where you are because you can get in this certain brainwave, you get in that zone. And I think to let go and float for an hour, how you can just read, people probably freak out, I'm sure at first, like, oh my gosh, 1 hour not doing anything, not checking my cell phone, which
Right.
I think people have to probably leave it in their car so they don't have that temptation to check their email while they're floating.
Yeah,
but
people do it. It's private.
Should have no Wi-Fi allowed or something. So I would, what do you know about the brain waves and how the floating helps in that aspect?
Yes. So an interesting thing about floating, kind of a term that I've used a few times is theta chaser. You're kind of going after that theta brainwave state. That's where we like to be when we're floating.
Theta brain.
Yeah, the theta brainwave. So there's these different wavelengths as you move down from fully awake to all the way down to like REM sleep or deeper sleep. So theta is kind of you're not totally asleep, but you're not awake. You're kind of in this just this zone where you can just relax. It's very comfortable. A lot of people experience that as they're going to sleep every night. And it's a very creative place to be. You can problem solve in that. You kind of are dreaming maybe a little bit. Your thoughts are wandering, but you're awake enough to follow along, which is really fun and interesting. So that's where we try to go with it, is to get into that theta brainwave state. I know there's people that meditate and they practice for years to get to that point, to be able to just control their brainwave state and get it down to those, slower, like a theta brainwave. The nice thing about floating is you can get there without even knowing what you're doing. You just get in there and lay back, like I said, training wheels. So you get back and you relax and you'll just kind of slip into that. It doesn't happen every time, but it does happen pretty often. And it's a practice. You get good at it. You can go there pretty quickly if you're, good at it.
Well, I find certain things that I do myself if I can't sleep at night is just what I tell my clients is count. I always think of Ernie and Bert from Sesame Street. But how you count, you breathe in, you count to 5, you exhale, you breathe out, counting to 6, and then work my way to 10 if I can, and just that just kind of helps you clear your mind a little bit and just let yourself go. But it is, I think you made a great point that you do need to commit to 3 times to really get the benefit. Because the first time you feel that, like you said, awkwardness and trying to figure out everything, and you might just finally let yourself relax the last little bit instead of the whole hour. and just with that practice. But just even as anything new is awkward feeling. If I have a new client in our fitness studio and they're doing a class or our private training, that it is like, you feel, I always tell people, don't just try it one time, you know, you have to do it a few times. So that's a good point.
Yeah, we do. I recommend people do the counting thing as well. I say, just try to count to 300. If you lose track, start over. Just doing it, you know, and eventually you'll just stop counting and you'll just be in that really, you know, kind of chilled out state. So that is a good technique for sure that we use a lot.
So let's dive into what you're floating in and why is that used and how it helps. What are the benefits? So it's magnesium or Epsom salts.
Yeah, it's Epsom salts. Like I said, 1,200 pounds of Epsom salt in 200 gallons of water. So if you've ever, you know, if you're trying to picture what does that even mean? That's 1,200 pounds. Well, it's a phrase I like to use a lot. It's a truckload of salt. It's literally a truckload of salt. And then you dissolve just that into 200 gallons of water, which is not much. It's probably, if you think of a standard kind of residential hot tub, for example, it's about maybe half of that amount of water. So it's a lot of salt, not a lot of water. It's very dense. And if you picture people that might be floating at the Dead Sea, it's a very common picture. People have seen somebody kick back reading the newspaper floating at the Dead Sea. That's kind of what this is like, right? But you're in Epsom salt, which is almost everybody knows has been used for probably centuries to help with inflammation and muscle soreness. You know, you were a kid and you were, you know, playing football and you come home and you got aches and pains. Your mom would say, get in the bath and throw in a cup of Epsom salt, right? This is like that, but on a whole different level. And then, like I said, it's body temperature, so it's maintained so that you try not to feel the water so much and the air. But yeah, and then in that environment, your muscles do start to let go. You do start to relax in ways that you never even realized you were missing out on, or that, you know, wasn't happening before. So a lot of people will lay back and relax, and they'll think, oh, I'm relaxed. This feels really nice. And then 10 minutes will go by and a muscle in their neck will let go. And they're like, whoa, they didn't even know that was holding tension, like it was flexed, you know? And it just starts to happen over time. And it's a pretty cool experience for people.
So for athletes, I'm sure recovery, as you're saying, Epsom salts and bath is often used. And then we have an Epsom gel that we sell at my studio that has arnica and Epsom on it, and rubbing it at night. And that's what I put on my neck a lot before I go to sleep to help me for sleeping better. So the magnesium or magnesium calm, different supplements. So the magnesium has so many benefits. I was just pulling out my book here from Staying Healthy with Nutrition book. But the benefits, or says the problems that might be helped with magnesium include alcoholism, angina, anxiety, arrhythmias, also sclerosis, hyperactivity, hypertension, insomnia, kidney stones, menstrual pain, muscle cramps, osteoporosis, PMS, epilepsy, fatigue. I mean, the list goes on of magnesium.
I've heard all of those things listed by a customer will come out and say, oh my gosh, you won't believe this has helped me with X.
Yeah.
All that entire list you just said, I've heard it all. You know, they all come out. Sometimes they're in tears, you know, like, oh, I haven't been pain-free for 3 years, or I was in a car accident. I haven't been pain-free for years, or, you know, I've been battling with stress and anxiety for years. At first, when I started seeing people come out with these really kind of deep experiences, it would kind of like, I'd take a step back and like, you're crying. Is everything okay? You know, is there anything I can help you with? And then some people are just like, I don't even know why I'm crying right now. I'm just, you know, it's like this big release. And then over time, they're like, I guess I'm just working through some stuff. You know, it's definitely mental and it's physical. And, you know, when it comes to, you know, like you were saying, athletes and recovery, it all goes hand in hand. Just being aware of your body more, you know, when you're in there and you've got no distraction, you're aware of where your body might be holding pain or tension. So you can work on that to release that so you don't get injured. That's more preventative. Or like stretching, you know, a lot of people, you know, stretching is a core part of doing any physical activity. Going into a float pod and floating before some intense workout or something does help your body kind of start to loosen up. And it can also be good for preventative, you know, a preventative process for athletes.
I think, yeah, recovery for sure. But what I'm talking more about over the years from my adrenal exhaustion, and which is technically hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis dysregulation, or HPA axis dysregulation, that I find a lot of people reach out to me for help because they know I've been having to recover a long time from it. And what I wrote about in my book, Life is Not a Race, there's all these red flags. Yes, you need some nutritional support to help rebuild and strengthen your adrenals and your hormones and gut health, but there's the lifestyle factors that a lot of people don't realize, that you can't just pop a pill or take some vitamins to get stronger, that you need to learn how to let go. And you need to know those red flags that, okay, I've been busy nonstop from the time I woke up until I go to bed at night, and then they can't sleep at night because their mind's working too much. They don't know how to unplug and disconnect. And, you know, I've really had to change my lifestyle, my habits, and become a little bit of a different personality to get myself to unplug a little bit more often and go away a little more. But I think the floating is big for that. And I think, you know, a lot of people out there, it doesn't matter if you're a triathlete, Ironman athlete, or just someone that, you know, has a crazy job, or a parent, you know, with kids, that I think everyone's lives are just too chronically busy. Even these teenagers, as you said, kids benefit because I see kids are overscheduled with sports and then homework and tutoring and all this stuff that I worry about our society, what's ahead in the future. So I can see why you guys are getting so busy, because people are probably figuring out, I don't know how to change. I don't know how to stop being busy.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge part of it. That your story, kind of how, you know, what you went through, it's different but similar to why I found floating. It's different but very similar to why I know many other people have in the industry have opened float centers and just got into this industry. And it's all very similar. You know, I was in a very stressful job. I was, you know, trying to be this peak mental performer and always reach for the next higher gear, and you know, not sleeping at night. And then I found floating, and I was like, whoa, this is great. More people need to do this. And I've read books where people say the same thing. I've talked to people at the float conference. The story is just ripples through the industry. It's a very common, you know, it's a very common thing.
See, I'm launching my new book, The Holistic Method, a manual workbook that's working on yourself from the inside out. And we should add that in my next thing because we have a chapter on stress and heart rate variability and how to de-stress, but I'll have to add floating in the next copy. But I think, you know, it'd be great to have someday a holistic method studio that we have our nutritional therapy and have our infrared sauna, have a float area, and have it all combined into one. Because I think, you know, people don't realize when they're working out, they're doing these high intensity interval training workouts, or they're doing Soul Cycle, or even yoga's high intensity now, that you need to shift it down and work what we keep talking about, the nervous systems, and get that parasympathetic stronger, because we're so sympathetic dominant. We talk a lot about that, how to be able to go back and forth, but so many people are stuck in the sympathetic mode. And we talk a lot about that in my book. But I think floating might be a great solution for people that don't like yoga. They don't like, you know, meditation. They don't want to sit still. But when you're in that pod, you need to just stay there and let yourself be still and quiet your mind.
Yeah, you can't help but let that just happens. You know, that's what I'm saying. You don't need to be a whiz floater. You just need to show up and, you know, put in a little bit of time. Yeah. And just give it a little bit of work, you know, and you'll get those benefits.
I want to, you know, wrapping up in a few minutes, but a big question everyone probably asks is, how do you clean it? Because most people probably go in naked or a swimsuit, and you're in this pod. Do you recirculate the water? How do you keep it sanitary and clean? Because I know we went and showered first. There's a shower in the room. You use the cleanser, and then you shampoo your hair. You go in the pod, and then you come out, and I did the shower gel, and it's a shampoo and conditioner, and then you put vinegar in your ear. So talk a little bit about the sanitation, because I know a lot of people freak about that.
Yeah, no, that's one of the top questions for sure. Since you brought that up, I'll answer that. Then the other one we'll address is claustrophobia. That's number 2. So we'll talk about that. But to answer your question, so The water is reused over and over, but it goes through a multi-stage process between every single guest. So the first thing to know is that there's 200 gallons of water, 1,200 pounds of Epsom salt. That environment alone is not conducive to anything thriving. Basically, nothing can really thrive in that environment. There are a few things that can survive for short periods of time, but nothing thrives. So that's step one. It's just a really harsh environment. Step two is after every customer, the entire body of water goes through a cleaning cycle 4 times.
Wow.
Which includes all the way down from a 16 micron filter down to a 1 micron filter, which is a 16th of a human hair. It gets hit with UV, ozone. It's heated and cycled back in. So by the time it goes through this process 4 complete times, it's ready to go for the next customer. And then, of course, we test the water multiple times, probably 3 to 4 times a day, just to make sure all the levels are right, everything's clean. In fact, what's kind of funny is every time we open a new location, like I'm down here in Houston right now, we're getting ready to fill these pods, and we will run the tap water through our cleaning system before it gets into the water. And so it's all fresh. You know, these pods have never had a drop of water in them. But we pull the filter out and we look at it, and you would not believe what we pull out of the city's water. And it happens every time. So the water that you're floating in is actually cleaner than what's coming out of the tap. Believe it or not, it's pretty crazy.
That's good.
So it's very clean, and that's the whole business. Float centers are built on the cleanliness of their facilities, so everybody pretty much takes it very seriously.
That's good to know. And I was just in Sayulita, Mexico for a holiday break, and I was sick for 5 days, and I realized probably brushing my teeth in the tap water in our house that we rented, because water does, is a lot of times contaminated other places, but you don't realize, our city water wherever you live is also needs to be filtered, which is why for hydration for clients, we always say, make sure it's clean water, not tap water. Has a lot of stuff in it. It's amazing.
There is. Yeah, you wouldn't believe it, but the proof's right there. You pull the filter out, brand new, bright white filter. It's like, oh, that thing's now brown or black. What's that about?
Oh, gross. So talk about the other fears people have is claustrophobia, because you go in, you turn off the light in the room, and then the pod, and then I put pictures on my Instagram, people can find, but it has a blue light in it. So once you're in there, you still have a little bit of a light. And then you close the pod, but I have to admit, I had to open it back up because I couldn't get fresh air. I needed it cracked open a little bit. So and then you turn off the lights.
Right. So what I always tell people is you are in complete control of your experience. When you go into that room, it is your private oasis of relaxation and self-healing and whatever you need out of that time. So when you walk in there, like you said, there's a shower. You shower before you get in the pod. If you want to turn the room lights off, you can. You don't have to. If you want to get in the pod and close the lid and turn those lights off, you can do that, but you don't have to. You can go as deep as you want with it. And for people that have those issues of claustrophobia, we say, ease into it. When you start out, leave all the lights on, leave the lid open, and just get in and float and get used to that. And then if you think, okay, that's not too bad, then turn the room lights off and just float to the blue glow, which is also a very relaxing and soothing experience. And then if you're ready to take it next level, turn that light off and then close the lid. Just kind of step into it. What we find most people say that have the claustrophobia issue is it's a concern going in. And then if they can convince themselves to try it, go all the way with the experience, then they come out and they say, wow, it wasn't at all what I thought it was going to be, because when the lights are off and the lid's closed, it doesn't feel small or cramped. It feels infinitely large. Like I said, you don't know where the edges are. You don't, when you get still and you're floating right in the center of that thing, you even don't know where the edge of your body is. So it feels like you're floating in outer space with nothing, around you. And so people that fear will usually subside pretty quickly for those that are adventurous enough to go all the way with it. And we definitely recommend it. But like I said, it's your call. It's your experience. Take it as far as you need to.
And then I know I'll add in that there was a music option. So you can start with music and end with music or have it the entire time. But it was kind of music I put on Sonos before I go to sleep at night. I have a little meditation music in the background for 30 minutes. But I like having that sound, a little bit of music background, but I'm sure it's good also to have no sound as well.
Yeah. And I do both. It just depends on my mood. What do I feel like? Some days I go in and I don't want any noise, and I just want to be total kind of, just me and nothing else. Other times I may want the music. And for a while, we were recommending for people that are maybe wanting the audio, maybe even take it a step further and get some waterproof headphones and listen to a guided meditation track, or binaural beats, or a book, an audiobook. If you really, just whatever will help you really relax. The purist is going to say, well, that's not the real float experience, right? You got to go all the way with it. But it's not about that. It's about what you need to get out of it, and sometimes you just want to relax and maybe hear an audiobook. That's nothing wrong with that either.
Yeah. So I know my massage therapist friend that works at my studio does stretch therapy. She goes in, she says 2 hours at a time when she goes. She's said she's in it. So how often do you float a week or a month yourself?
Myself, I try to go twice a week if I can. I go through spurts. Sometimes I'll go more than that. Sometimes much less. Like right now, I'll probably, I'm down in Houston. I might float one time while I'm down here, just at the very end when we get done. But it'll have been 10 days since I was in Seattle and able to float. So it just, kind of, I work it into my lifestyle, whatever I've got going on. I think the ideal float amount of floating for somebody is probably once a week, because the effects are residual. They will hang around longer. So like I mentioned, you'll get that really good night's sleep, probably for a couple of days, but every day you get further away from when your float was, the effects are less and less. And then if you float again, it kind of boosts it up. The same is true for like lactic acid buildup. We have a lot of athletes who float very, very regularly, professional athletes at the top of their, game, and they'll come in, they'll work out really hard, they'll float, and that helps. If they continuously do that, it helps them keep that lactic acid buildup down. They're not sore, and their muscles feel better. They can train harder, and keep it going without taking maybe a day off. So it's, it's one of those things you want to do multiple times, ideally once a week if you can.
Yeah, I think I'm in. And people can find more information on the website urbanfloat.com. And they have lots of research studies. If you go to urbanfloat.com/studies, it can show you a lot of information. Then franchise information, talk about that. If someone lives in a different state or part of the world, they want to bring floating into their city, what can they do?
Yeah, well, if you go to franchise.urbanfloat.com, that's our franchise website. You can learn all about the business side of floating. We've got a lot of information out there that kind of walks people through. Is this something that, might be a good fit for me? We're excited to be bringing it all over the country. We're working on deals from coast to coast, and 2018 is going to be a really big year for Urban Float as far as expansion and getting our footprint out there. I'm very excited. Obviously, it's just cool, expanding this concept out. But from the very first day I started, and I have the notes that I wrote down when I was done with my float, it was, one of the notes was literally, bring this to national expansion. Everybody needs access to this. Like that was before I even had a company name that was on the list. So it's exciting to see that happen. The people we're meeting through this franchising process is just awesome. They're great people that are bringing a really beneficial thing to their communities, which makes them very happy. They're able to give back, and it's a good feeling when you're helping people either deal with pain or reach higher performance in whatever they're doing. It's just a rewarding business, and so we're excited to be rolling it out.
That's awesome. So you're making me, I have to write, I'm working on it tomorrow actually, my 2018 roadmap for my business, but we always have to write our bag goal, your big, hairy, audacious goal. And mine started making me think I always want this holistic method all in one studio, that it's the fitness and the yoga and the Pilates, but now infrared sauna, and have the pods, and have it all in one spot, and have my recovery Normatec boots in another room, and you can just have it all in place. But I think it's so important to talk about the whole athlete, which is what the podcast is about, that it's not just train hard and, do it. More is better, and change that philosophy of athletes to improve your performance in life and sports. You need to look at all these different elements, and including that chronic stress and that chronic busyness that I think is causing a lot of our health problems and decreasing performance in a lot of athletes, because it's also aging you really fast. So the other part I talk a lot about lately and had a health fair that we had you guys speak at, that we need to slow the aging process down. And that's another benefit of this floating method, I think, too, is, we need to get on this now, because I think it's just getting worse. The next generations are getting more sucked into the being connected. So thank you for your time so much today.
Yeah, my pleasure. It was awesome coming on. Thanks for having me. And anytime I get a chance to talk about floating, I'm game. So thank you.
All right. Well, we'll see if we have more questions in the future, and we'll hand them over to you guys, and we will be in touch. And I look forward to trying to figure out how to float once a week and fit that in my schedule too. Not overschedule myself, but be beneficial. Right. Great. Yeah. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Whole Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at wholeathletepodcast.com. You can help us continue and grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and see you next time.